Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet. This review is brought to you in part by Rogers Hobby Center in Saginaw, Michigan, where the fun begins. This review covers Don Garlits Wynn's Jammer. It's a 125 scale kit from AMT, number 1163. Known as Swamp Rat 6B, this is one of Garlits' most successful cars. This car, which went to England as part of the 64 NHRA tour, made the famous 200-mile-an-hour pass at Island Dragway, breaking the 200-mile mark in August of 1964. It also won the 64 Nationals and set the national speed record at the 65 Winter Nationals. It also gave Garlits what he called his greatest win at the 65 March meet, when he finally conquered the big one at Bakersfield. Now this kit has 85 parts molded in smoke clear, chrome, black, and has printed vinyl rear tires, rubber lines, and a blower belt. The kit was originally released in 1965 and it's had many releases since then, including this 2019 release with new decals. I'd rate this for a intermediate to advanced builder because there are some fragile and delicate parts. It's a single purpose kit and there won't be any left over. So when you're done, the finished model will measure 8 inches long, 2.5 inches wide, and 1 3/4 inches tall. Oh hey, just a second folks, I hear Newt, the program director, tapping on the glass there. Something catch your eye there, Newt, or am I talking too loud again?
Hey, these are the ones before funny cars, right? Did they still go really fast?
Well, that's right, Newt. The rail dragsters had been out since the late 50s, but funny cars kind of came into their own about the same time as the appearance of this dragster right here.
So, why do they use those tiny bicycle wheels on the front?
Well, that's a good question, Newt. They're kind of like tractors with small front wheels. A dragster can turn easily enough, but not too quickly. You don't want to do that at 200 miles an hour. But mostly, they're for the benefit of reduced tire weight and improved aerodynamics. Here are the contents of the kit, including the display base. And you'll find that there are some attachment points and a few parting lines you'll need to address. But for the most part, it's been very well preserved by round 2, and I'm glad to see it reissued. Now, remember to use the manufacturer's safety and use guidelines when you use any of the products that you see or hear in the review. We'll mostly be using liquid cement, sometimes super glue for fragile components, and even for clear glass items and things of that nature like the windshield, some white glue. The expanded decal sheet now has the original decals along with sponsor decals, etc. that appear in the museum display, and it also has the ID strips there at the bottom for the display base. The instructions are pretty basic. There's 2 parts, the engine and the rest, but we're going to break it down so it's a little easier to follow the sequence. So we're going to start with these parts. And remember to scrape all the chrome, or even paint for that matter, from parts where you want to glue the pieces together to get good adhesion. Now take the steering shaft and the bell housing and add those together in the recessed area there, and then add the clutch and the gas pedals. And finally, add each half of the steering wheel. Bring out some of the detail on these chrome parts. I added a black wash, and that's a mix of 50-50 paint, black paint, and thinner, to just seep into the recesses so you can see the parts better. I added some wires to the kit with a homemade distributor. It's just something that shows more of an effect of realism for the engine. To make it look even better, I decided to section the distributor magneto that came with the kit and use parts of it for my unit. Now, I took the old cap and replaced the wired one with that, and then I glued the new cap on the old lower and painted it aluminum. And so next up, we'll head for the engine. Gather up the parts for the engine, and it has a lot of detail for an old kit. It includes internal components that I'll save for my parts bin since you can't see them anyway. But you could also build this as a work in progress and have the engine partially done and displayed. Now we're going to get the engine halves out, and we're going to glue those together and add the heads and the valley cover, and I painted that red. Next, assemble the blower by adding the ends to the main housing and the bottom cover. That should be painted aluminum. Now I add the scoop, the fuel block, and the oil pressure gauge to this, and if you want, leave the oil pan as a see-through, but you can paint. I painted mine silver. Now the crankshaft is needed to have something to glue the pulley and flywheel to unless you replace it with a piece of evergreen rod. Now paint the headers metallic color, and then add them now along with the front cover, the valve covers, and the remaining pulleys. Carefully add the blower belt once all your glue is dry and it's a nice tight fit. Then I drilled some holes for the wires and the valve covers and painted the surrounding area black for the boots. I painted the butterfly holes in the scoop there with a bright red, and I also gave a black wash to the chrome on the engine for the same reason as I did in the interior there. Essentially, these are the parts that you'll use for step 2, but we're going to break this down, but gather up all the parts and remove any of the parting lines and knit marks that you see there. Start with the front end and take the main wishbone piece and add the steering knuckles by pushing the pin in from the top. Now check your fit, as you should for all the parts in this kit, but check it here for sure. I had to drill the holes out a little bit bigger to get that to work. Now add the lower arms on the same pins and then finish it off with the rod connecting the left and right sides. I'll also build the fuel tank now and prep it with the glue on the ends to the tank and then the fuel lines to the ends. Now glue the front wheel halves together and add them to the front tires. They simply go together as they normally would, a sandwich deal there. And don't forget the center caps. Next we'll work on the rear end and glue the two halves together and add the rear cover for the axle portion. Paint this black and then add the pig and the drive shaft to it once it's dry. Now assemble the rear wheels, and then I first kind of scuffed up the surface area of where the tread would be to get rid of the fake plastic look. Actual car wheels are kind of a magnesium color, so I painted mine with a metallic gray. Now insert the outer wheel into the tire. In this order, add the inner wheel ring, the inner wheel, and the backing plate to the back side of the tire. Finally, slide the axle into one completed wheel, put it through the rear housing, and then squeeze the other wheel on the other side. Next I worked on the parachute, and I painted it a flat brown, and I added some chrome pen accents to it. I painted the seat a NATO black, which is kind of a semi-gloss, and then I added some flat black belts and chrome buckles to give it a little contrast. Grab the parts for the chassis, add the main support bar to one side of the cage, and then add the other cage side. After that dries, add the roll bar and the front support bar. This assembly gets painted kind of a glossy black, and in this order add the following to the completed cage: the rear end assembly, the shifter, the firewall assembly, the seat, the fuel tank assembly, and then the front end. The body comes in a nice translucent black, which is fine for display purposes, but I decided that I wanted something that looked basically just like the real one. So I decided to tape off the top of the body and spray paint it from underneath because the plastic looked very nice. So I left it intact and painted inside. You can still polish or even just wax out the top surface here, but it came out very nice. Obviously it's got a good luster to it, and you can just use pretty much any shade of black on the inside. What you see here is an inner box flap for decal placement, but it also contains other information we'll get to. You've got two choices for the decals, and if you want the original livery, you can use the outer box flaps and the current livery that's on display in the museum. Now, I went with the current livery, and after the decals, I decided to use some floor gloss to seal the decals into position. On this version of the kit, there used to be locating holes for the steering suspension, but those indents are gone now. Fortunately, they've provided this location guide, which is the previously mentioned decal placement flap there, so you can get that, and it will show you exactly where those holes go for the steering parts. I taped off the body and the area where I needed to drill the holes for those locations, and that's to keep both from accidentally scratching the body, and you can mark it up without doing any damage to the surface. So once again, I taped it off where I needed to drill, and I used the location guide and started marking out the mounting holes. I also used a smaller starter bit and then a larger one for the final hole. Then I marked out and drilled the hole on both sides so that I didn't have to worry about keeping the pin vise perfectly straight all the way through. And as you can see, it was pretty much right on when it came through both sides. I used the same technique for all of the suspension holes, and they came out just fine. And now we can add the body to the chassis, which slips right over the top, and then add the parachute to the rear of the upper body before adding the lower body to finish it off. Finally, we can add that good looking engine to the chassis via the locating tabs on the engine block in the front and the fuel hose from the fuel pump to the fuel block onto the blower. I painted the display base a semi-gloss black and added the stickers for ID to the bottom there on the ledge. And there you have it. Your model is finished. There you have it, and looking very much like a museum quality build. After all, it does look like the museum version. Here's your model. It's a stunning head turner. It'll look great on your shelf. And you can use the transparent body if you want to see some internal details a little bit there. I was going for a little bit more realism, and so I painted it from the inside, kind of like you would with a clear body slot car or an RC car. But as you can see, she turned out just beautiful. A little attention to detail and painting, some contrasting colors in areas along with a little black wash will give you a beautiful example to put on your shelf. We hope you like this premium step-by-step scale model kit review, and so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can do that by clicking on the icon in the lower right of any of our reviews, and you could also find us on Facebook or our website, rightonreplicas.com. Thanks.